It's difficult to remain too calm given the news from Greece. The changes taking place in that country, even as we speak, are going to mark a turning point in Europe. And it's difficult now to remember how long it's been since progressive forces on the European continent had anything to celebrate. You look at country after country in Europe, one misery produced another. The politicians, whether of the center-left or the center-right, essentially carried out the same policies. Labour in Britain was an extreme example of this, when in 1997 Tony Blair was elected Prime Minister. There was some hope among some people that change would come, but that change never came. In effect, they carried on with the policies of Thatcher and Thatcherism. In Germany, a victory of the Social Democrats and Greens did very little to the economy except to monetarize it even more, put constraints on the German trade unions, effectively compelled them to reduce their wages under the threat of jobs going to other parts of the world. Italy's been a disaster story. France unemployment is high. And this is what it's been like now for decades. The 2008 crisis, the Wall Street crash, created havoc in Europe, and three countries nearly went under: Greece, Portugal, Ireland. Of course, a little bit before that, Iceland had gone under, but recovered. They didn't follow the instructions of the European bankers at all, or anyone else. They elected a new government and set their house in order. But the victory of Syriza in Greece marks a huge turning point, the beginning of a fight back against austerity and neoliberalism in Europe. I remember how different it was in 2012. When it looked as if Syriza was about to triumph, every single major European media outlet, every major politician, elected or not, chipped in to say that if the Greek people elected Syriza, they would starve. There wouldn't be enough food, their wages wouldn't be paid, it would be a disaster story. And that pressure frightened large parts of the elderly population of Greece, regardless of their politics, and they either stayed at home or they voted against Syriza, which lost by a very narrow percentage. Instead, New Democracy, the Conservative Party of Greece, was elected, and for the last 3 years, it was able to do absolutely nothing. And all the threats of what would happen to Greece under Syriza happened to Greece under the Conservatives, the government effectively imposed by the Troika and the European elite. This is why this time they were a bit more careful, having seen the disaster that enveloped the country after their last intervention. And throughout the last 3 years, a campaign in Greece has been mounted by Syriza and its supporters for an electoral victory. We were not sure, but the mood of the European elite was not exactly the same as it was 3 years ago. Perhaps they thought they could maneuver and manipulate a new party, but the pressure from below is very strong. Two concurrent processes will be in motion from now on. There will be a strong attempt by the EU elite, led by Germany, to try and tame Syriza via a combination of threats and concessions. The aim of the operation is simple: to try and split Syriza at a very early stage. Already, you have so-called experts being paraded on the BBC and other television networks saying the key task is to totally isolate the left inside Syriza and make sure that it is under control, not completely, but at least 60 to 70% so we can manipulate it. But this is not going to be easy because of the disastrous state of the Greek economy. And it's important to point out that of the 240 billion given by the German banks principally, but the European elite, the 240 billion given to Greece over the last 5 years, of this only 10% went to the Greek government. The rest went back to pay the banks for the previous debt. So it becomes a vicious cycle. The more money that's given, the more money that is paid to service the debt. And it's a disaster story. That is why there will be a high level of expectation from Syriza's electorate and beyond. Mass mobilizations will be extremely important to sustain the new government and push it to carry through the first necessary measures. What are these? As I said, the debt has become a burden that has to be discarded. After negotiations, but rapidly, because there is no way in which the Greek economy can carry on as it has over the last 3 years and before. The readjustment measures imposed by the Troika must be repudiated immediately before moving on to implement a plan that restores the social gains that have been achieved and were dismantled by the Troika-led governments, who have now all suffered in the polls. We look at the election results for a minute. They're very striking. The party that tried to impose this system on Greece crushed. 27.8% is all that New Democracy, the Conservative Party, got. Syriza almost doubled them on 36.3%, just 2 seats short of an overall majority. PASOK, the old Socialist Party, and this is an important lesson, was hated by the population for what it did in league with the Conservatives to the Greek people, and it's been punished very decisively. It got 4.7% of the vote, a total and complete humiliation of what was once a proud social democratic party. In fact, it was defeated by the Greek Communist Party, an ultra-left, sectarian, Stalinist group, which got 5.5%. And were the KKE, the Greek Communist Party, prepared to collaborate with Syriza while not even joining the government, the majority would be quite large. You would have a total of 149 seats plus 15 seats, a comfortable working majority for the government. But for the KKE, the problem is not Greek capitalism, but Syriza, in the sense that they want to achieve the impossible, i.e. the destruction of the system, which cannot be achieved at the moment for a whole variety of reasons, and therefore seek to punish Syriza because it's more realistic in what can be achieved over the next 2 or 3 years. So we have sectarianism at the heart of the far left in that country, which has effectively denied Syriza a big overall majority. Nonetheless, the first 3 months will be decisive in terms of revealing the contours of the political and economic landscape envisaged by Syriza. We have to be clear, neoliberalism cannot be dismantled overnight, but the will to do so must be paramount. Syriza has obviously attracted a number of bandwagon careerists, quite a few from PASOK. and it would be a tragedy if they were allowed to sabotage what can and should be done. The message of the Greek voters is very clear. We do not want PASOK Mark II. And Greek is blessed with a lot of left-wing economists, one of whom might be a finance minister soon, the other on the left of the party, Kostas Lapavitsas, has just been elected member of parliament from the northern part of Greece with a large majority, and was heard singing an old communist resistance song last night as they celebrated the victory. So with the number of economists they've got, many of whom agree on the basic principles, how to move forward. And this will depend a great deal on the European elite. Are they going to punish Syriza again? It would be very foolish, because if they put the squeeze on really hard, which only a slightly lunatic element would favor, Syriza will be left with no choice but to repudiate the debt unilaterally and withdraw from the European Monetary Union. After all, being a member of the European Union does not necessitate staying within the EMU. So, will Syriza be able to reshape Greek society? That is what we hope, and that is what the European establishment fears. We know from the South American experience that implementation takes time, but a start has to be made, and leaders have to make sure that all that is being done is in the open. That was a huge advantage in Venezuela when Hugo Chavez first won the elections, that every week he had a television program called Allo Presidente, in which he would appear, talk to the people, answer questions, question elements of the audience, and each week, I remember because I once went with him to the Colombian border to participate in this program, each week the program would take place in a different part of the country. And each week it was watched. That was the one program which had to be shown on every television network because it was the president, and he used it to be transparent. He would explain to people what the problems were, what they were trying to do, who was trying to sabotage them, what the Americans were doing, how they had played a part in organizing a coup to try and topple his democratically elected government, etc. And that's an important lesson which the Syriza government should learn, because there are two ways of going about it. One is to hire spin doctors, one of the most ghastly creations in modern European politics, where you hire a spin doctor to tell you what to say and what not to say. And this is fine for politicians who have nothing to say and who effectively carry out the will of the bankers and the corporations. They need spin doctors to bullshit. But for politicians who've got something to say, spin doctors are utterly useless. Rely on your own political instincts. That is what all the South American leaders have done. Evo Morales in Bolivia, the late Chavez in Venezuela, Maduro today in Venezuela, Correa in Ecuador, Mujica in Uruguay. They rely on their own political instincts because they are confident. And I say this especially given the way in which previous Greek governments have operated, and most European governments. Transparency is a vital ingredient to mass mobilization and politicization. The more public support that is seen on the streets at critical moments in the months that come, the more citizens in other European Union countries will be inclined to support the Greek demands. Because what the European Union is doing to Greece, it is doing to virtually every other country in the Union as well. Ultimately, in my opinion, if the European Union elite and the Troika refuse to make meaningful concessions, then the only alternative is to defy them. And if, as a result, Greece is expelled from the European Union, something, by the way, that would be completely unconstitutional, then Plan B has to be implemented. A Syriza government that allows itself to be effectively blackmailed by the European Union will run the serious danger of becoming PASOK Mark II. And that would be a huge disaster for Greece, and that would demoralize the new voters and the new mood in Spain. It's very interesting that in the last rally before the Greek election, the person at the side of Alexis Tsipras was Iglesias, the leader of Podemos from Spain. Very interesting because they don't agree with each other on everything, but the message was clear. We are trying to create a new Europe, different from the Europe that exists today. And so I don't think that Alexis Tsipras is going to cave into the European Union apologists within his own ranks. But the pressure will be huge, especially from the Germans, for whom the monetary union has acquired supernatural status. As the European Monetary Union is obviously not working, it needs to be carefully dumped. The rise of German nationalism, which we are witnessing, must be of concern to the elite, and the emergence of Pegida is a clear warning. For many years now, the situation in Greece has been polarized. The fascists of Golden Dawn have 16 members in parliament. 7 of these are in prison or under house arrest for all sorts of crimes, including killing the Greek rapper, including assaults on Greek citizens, and numerous other things. But one shouldn't underestimate them because they are very strongly entrenched in the special police forces and the police apparatus. And Golden Dawn and the conservative descendants of the wrong side in the Greek Civil War have the support of an important section of the Greek population. This cannot be ignored, and we do so at our peril. The emergence and the growing support for Syriza and Podemos is the most positive development in Europe. But in order for it to move another step forward without moving backwards, it will have to challenge the Greek oligarchs, confront the shipowners' mafia that owns the media, that pays few taxes, if any, and also, in my opinion, I know this is a sensitive question, to remove the tax-free status of the Orthodox Church. It's not that the Church is poor. Its ownership of property makes the institution an oligarch in its own right. In the case of the ship owners, they must be compelled to pay taxes in retrospect so that the country can move forward economically again and start functioning properly. Such a move will no doubt annoy the more backward sections of the EU elite, who are currently busy printing more money under the guidance of the European Central Bank, no doubt to make the rich even richer. But taking on the Greek rich, the propertied classes who pay nothing, will be popular both in Greece and in Europe as a whole, and will lay the basis for a political battle with the Troika by splitting their supporters. They will try and split Syriza from its base. Syriza should campaign effectively, and it has the economists to do so, to divide the Troika. Might there be a domino effect? Will the Greek cure, once it starts, spread to other diseased economies? Definitely. But the rhythms in each country will be determined by local conditions and histories. Listen to the bells tolling in Greece, we say to the corrupt and spineless politicians in Ireland, in Portugal, in Italy, in France. Listen carefully, groups on the left. The longer you cling to the underpants of discredited political parties sharing power here, on your knees there, you will fail. This will be the impact because Syriza will be the first party in Europe elected to power that has done so by challenging the extreme center that has ruled Europe for many decades, and its favored economic system, a financialized neoliberalism. With regional elections in Spain in May, we might see an interesting chain reaction. And who knows, perhaps the far left in Portugal and the left party in Germany might realize that working with social democracy is a recipe for decline and disaster. One of the central issues that has become a huge battle cry for the right is immigration. Because of the austerity measures, unemployment, precarious working conditions, etc., the European legal framework, i.e. Fortress Europe, is racist as far as non-Europeans are concerned. Syriza and Podemos have defended the rights of people whose lives have been wrecked by a US, EU-supported planetary globalization. But it is only if resources are released for improving the lives of actually existing citizens will it make it easier to provide help and legal rights for the migrants. When some European politicians from the extreme center parties justify the deaths by drowning in the seas surrounding Europe on the grounds that this will discourage other immigrants, it is not simply the inhumanity that one notices, it is a total failure to understand why people migrate and who creates the conditions. Economic and climate catastrophes, coupled with wars initiated by the West, have usually been the cause in recent years. A classic case is the expulsion of Africans from a post-Gaddafi Libya, a situation created by NATO. Many of these expelled Africans then went radical, regrouped in Mali. That was followed by a French military intervention in Mali to save the government. The same France that had intervened in Libya and created the mess then had to intervene in Mali because of its mess, and the situation remains bad. The financial markets that consider themselves and are considered as such by politicians to be the regulators of politics and democracy itself are now in crisis. Will a left government in Greece clash with the market system within the capitalist framework? Yes, I think that is what is on the agenda today, and what the Bolivarian governments in South America have been doing for the last 15 years with relative success, though it varies from country to country. We have to understand that it is this market fundamentalism that has led to a sharp decline in democracy. What is needed is a combination of regulation of capitalism, state intervention to take back the public utilities, and create and own industries that can help the utilities and enhance democracy on every level to ensure popular participation. That can be our only minimum program at the present moment. Nothing else is possible, and to think it is empty talk. It's unrelated to the realities. What is the future of the European Union? Many people not remotely on the left are now arguing it's in a very bad state. It subordinated politics to economics and was undemocratic from the beginning. Blaming supposedly lazy Southerners for the crisis is grotesque. This is not only my view or the view of left-wing economists or left-wing politicians, but now hedge fund kings like George Soros, who recently said, and I quote, "My worst fears are confirmed. This is what I was afraid of, that the euro would be preserved, pervert the venture, and destroy the European Union. Instead of the solidarity the EU was supposed to have embodied, it became every country for itself." He was backed up by the new Pope Francis from the Vatican, who is to the left of virtually every EU government today. Not Syriza, but it's forming a government as yet. Pope Francis insisted, and I quote, "The great ideas that inspired Europe seem to have lost their attraction, only to be replaced by the bureaucratic formalities of its institutions. The single formula approach on the currency union is dead in the waters of the Mediterranean. An alternative needs to be developed. It would be better if this were done by common agreement, but that is unlikely. So new radical governments might have to take unilateral decisions. Many years ago, the great Greek poet Kafkavi wrote a poem called When the Watchman Sees the Light. A Greek friend sent me this yesterday, and it's very apposite to the situation, which is one of both excitement, expectation, celebration, but also worries. And the poem, in a way, sums it up very well. Winter, summer, the watchman sat there, looking out from the roof of Atreus' palace. Now he has good news to report. He's seen the fire light up in the distance, and he's happy. Besides, the drudgery's over now. It's hard to sit there night and day in heat and cold, waiting for a fire to show on the peak of Arachnion. Now the longed-for signal has appeared. Yet, when happiness comes, it brings less joy than one expected. But at least we've gained this much. We've rid ourselves of hope and expectation. Many things will happen to the house of Atreus. No need to be wise to guess this now. The watchman has seen the light, so let's not exaggerate. The light is good, and those coming are good. Their words and actions also good, and let's hope all goes well. But Argos can do without the house of Atreus. Ancient houses are not eternal. Of course, many people will have much to say. We should listen, but we won't be deceived by words such as indispensable, unique, and great. Someone else indispensable and unique and great can always be found at a moment's notice. These wise words sum up what much of Greece, including many of Syriza's supporters and many on the left in Europe are thinking. Because if the Syriza victory has done anything, it has once again encouraged and stimulated the entire European left to feel that something new is possible. And therefore, we end by toasting Syriza, not something we often do on this show, but these are special times and important days. So we propose a toast to Syriza from the team which has been working on this program for many, many months, and myself.
Tu mi devi seppellire e seppellire sulla montagna. Oh bella ciao, bella ciao, bella ciao, ciao, ciao. Seppellire sulla montagna sotto l'ombra d'un bel fiore. Era niente che passerà. Oh bella ciao, bella ciao, bella ciao, ciao, ciao.
Here's to Greece and Syriza. Greece.
Merci.